Most people do not live in obvious misery. They function, they work, they fill their days. And yet, beneath the surface, something feels unresolved. More than a century ago, Henry David Thoreau observed that the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. It is an old sentence, but it remains unsettlingly accurate. This desperation rarely announces itself loudly. It appears instead as a vague sense that time is slipping away, as an uncomfortable awareness that life is being endured rather than lived, as a quiet suspicion that one's potential is being slowly wasted. Phillips Brooks once described this state as the feeling that the thing we ought to be is beating beneath the thing we are. It is not dramatic despair. It is something subtler and perhaps more dangerous, because it is easy to live with for a very long time. How many people sense that something in their life is misaligned, yet continue anyway? How many feel the weight of unfulfilled possibility, but tell themselves there will be time later? And what happens when later never truly arrives? If these feelings are ignored long enough, they do not disappear. They linger. They quietly haunt us with images of what might have been. In this reflection, we examine the psychological forces behind this quiet desperation and why transformation so often feels both necessary and terrifying. Carl Jung once wrote, "We cannot change anything unless we accept it." Acceptance, in this sense, is not resignation. It is recognition. The first step toward transformation is the acknowledgement that something in one's way of life no longer works. An honest measure of this necessity lies in the frequency of certain inner states: regret, guilt, anxiety, persistent dissatisfaction, or a diffuse sense of depression. Jung believed that in most cases, these were not random malfunctions of the psyche, but signals. According to Jung, neurotic symptoms often arise from an inadequate relationship to life itself. They communicate, sometimes painfully, that something essential has been neglected. Yolande Jacobi, writing on Jung's work, described neurosis as a force that compels a person to confront the foundations of their being, their limits, their unrealized possibilities, and their relationship to the world. In this view, psychological suffering is not merely an illness to be eliminated. It has meaning. It carries direction. Jung emphasized the prospective aspect of neurosis, the idea that it points forward toward necessary development. Rather than viewing these states only as burdens, he saw them as paradoxical agents of growth. Yet when confronted with discomfort, most people choose a different path. Instead of changing their behavior or questioning the structure of their life, they attempt to escape the feeling itself. They numb it. They distract themselves. They postpone confrontation. Alcohol, substances, endless entertainment, compulsive activity, these become tools not of pleasure, but of avoidance. The goal is not joy, but silence. But this silence comes at a cost. Jung warned against what he called the safe road. It is the path of minimal risk, minimal confrontation, minimal growth. A life structured entirely around comfort and avoidance. He wrote that the safe road is, psychologically speaking, the road of death. Not physical death, but the slow cessation of inner movement. Nothing truly happens anymore. What kind of safety requires the abandonment of one's potential? What kind of peace demands the shrinking of the self? Once the need for change is acknowledged, another question arises. What kind of change actually leads to a fulfilled life? In the mid-20th century, psychologist Abraham Maslow approached this question differently from most of his peers. While others focused on pathology and dysfunction, Maslow chose to study individuals who appeared psychologically healthy and deeply alive. What he found was striking. The most fulfilled individuals were not driven primarily by external rewards or social approval. They were motivated by what Maslow called self-actualization, an ongoing process of realizing one's capacities, talents, and inner nature. Self-actualization, for Maslow, was not a final destination. It was a continuous movement toward greater integration, authenticity, and purpose. He described it as a commitment to becoming what one is capable of becoming. Maslow went so far as to say that if a person consistently chooses to be less than they are capable of being, they will likely remain unhappy throughout their life. But how does one begin this process? After years, sometimes decades of stagnation, after habits have hardened and avoidance has become routine? An old proverb, often attributed to Ralph Waldo Emerson, offers a simple but profound framework. Sow a thought, and you reap an action. Sow an action, and you reap a habit. Sow a habit, and you reap a character. Sow a character, and you reap a destiny. The first step, then, lies in thought specifically, in the selection of an aim. Self-actualizing individuals, Maslow observed, are often defined by a sense of mission. Their lives are oriented toward something beyond mere survival or comfort. Yet this is where many people become stuck. They believe they must first discover their true passion, a perfect, pre-existing calling that will reveal itself through introspection alone. When it does not appear, they remain immobilized. This expectation overlooks a crucial psychological reality. Passion often follows competence. Interest deepens as skills develop. Meaning grows through engagement, not waiting. Rather than endlessly searching for the perfect purpose, it is often wiser to choose something challenging, something that demands effort and growth, and begin. The goal itself matters less than the transformation it requires. Having something to aim at is not important because of the external rewards it may bring. It matters because of who one must become in the process of pursuing it. Challenging goals force individuals out of comfort. They require discipline, learning, and confrontation with limitation. They reveal strengths that were previously invisible. Yet even with a chosen aim, many people remain unable to act. They attribute their inaction to anxiety, depression, fear, or lack of confidence. They reason that once these feelings disappear, action will follow. But this logic is often reversed. These emotional states frequently arise because of avoidance, not before it. They are reinforced by the refusal to engage with what life demands. Waiting to feel ready can become a lifelong delay. Meditation, reflection, and insight have value, but alone, they rarely resolve this impasse. Change requires behavior. This principle lies at the heart of Morita therapy, a Japanese psychotherapeutic approach that emphasizes purposeful action over emotional control. Practitioners of Morita therapy encourage individuals to realign their lives toward doing what needs to be done, regardless of how they feel. David Reynolds, a prominent interpreter of this approach, explained it simply: focus on behavior and allow feelings to take care of themselves. When people become absorbed in meaningful, constructive activity, emotions lose their tyrannical power. They remain present, but they no longer dominate. Self-actualizing individuals understand this. They do not wait for perfect emotional conditions. They act with anxiety, with doubt, with fear. Thomas Huxley once wrote that the most valuable result of education is the ability to make oneself do what must be done, whether one feels like it or not. Importantly, self-actualization does not eliminate suffering. Maslow was explicit about this. Healthy individuals still experience conflict, sadness, guilt, and frustration. These are part of being human. The difference lies not in the absence of discomfort, but in the willingness to act in its presence. This raises an uncomfortable question. Do you allow your emotions to dictate your life, or do you carry them while moving forward? Those who act despite fear tend to live fuller lives than those who retreat from it. As Emerson wrote, "Do the thing you fear, and the death of fear is certain." One powerful way to cultivate this courage is through an awareness of mortality. Stoic philosophers argued that remembering the brevity of life sharpens our priorities and dissolves trivial fears. When time is recognized as finite, hesitation loses some of its hold. Steve Jobs articulated this clearly. when he said that remembering he would be dead one day helped him make the most important decisions of his life. In the face of death, pride, embarrassment, and fear of failure often lose their power. But awareness of mortality is a double-edged sword. If life is lived deliberately, it can bring clarity and courage. If it is wasted, it produces guilt and regret. Those who delay transformation for too long may eventually find themselves haunted not by fear, but by remorse. Jung warned that avoiding psychological development often leads to crisis later in life, particularly in its second half. What is neglected early returns with force. Yolande Jacobi described this as the revenge of arrested development. It manifests as anxiety without clear cause, vague guilt, chronic dissatisfaction, and despair. The individual may not have committed any moral wrongdoing, and yet they feel profoundly guilty. Their guilt lies not in illness, but in neglect, in knowing something is wrong and doing nothing to address it. This is perhaps the most painful form of suffering, the realization that one's life was not taken seriously enough. So the question becomes unavoidable. What are you postponing that your inner life already knows cannot be avoided? If this reflection resonates with you, this channel exists for that reason. The Inner Lens explores the quiet psychological patterns that shape adult life, not to offer instructions, but to illuminate understanding. If you value slow, honest psychological reflection, consider subscribing. New explorations are released regularly. Sometimes, seeing clearly is the beginning of change.